And we're back at the White House with Sienna Bossie, Brooke Bilkis, and Ari Comer to discuss the important events of the War of 1812, the burning of Washington. Brooke, can you explain to me what happened on August 12, 1814?
In 1814, the British and former American slaves set the White House on fire as an act of violence to diminish America after their fight with Napoleon.
Interesting. So Sienna, tell me more. Why did the British's war with Napoleon end?
The British ended the war with Napoleon so that they could put their efforts into fighting the United States. They thought of targeting the White House to destroy the country's reputation and set them as weak.
That makes sense. What did the British do before fighting the U.S. and deciding to burn down the White House? Did they do anything to prepare?
The White House had been expecting guests that night, and a prep meal for 40 was sitting on the dining room table. When the British arrived, they decided to feast on this meal before taking action and burning down the building itself.
Brooke, how many British troops were there to invade the White House?
About 14,000 British troops tried to invade the United States from Canada in the late summer of 1814. At the same time as the troops invaded the United States, British ships arrived in the Chesapeake Bay. 4,000 British troops left the ships and descended on Washington, D.C.
And Sienna, how long was the British's journey before they reached the White House?
The British Army marched 10 miles in the heat and fought a pitched battle and had 5 other miles to walk before they reached the capital. Major General Robert Ross rested his men for 2 hours after their battle and left the 2 brigades there as backup. After the men's 5-mile walk, they arrived at the Capitol. It was 11 p.m. when they ate the food set at the table and torched the White House to the ground.
That's a long time for them to travel in such harsh conditions. Also, Sienna, I heard about the storm that saved Washington. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes, the storm that saved Washington happened the night that the British burned the White House. This storm pushed the British troops from the Bayside City and saved D.C. from more destruction.
Wow, that's truly such a long time. Who were the main people warned about the approach of the British?
The main people warned about the approach of the British was James and Dolly Madison. Dolly took action and tried to preserve and save as many household items as she could.
Yes, about that. I've seen the inside of the White House, the full-length picture of George Washington. Brooke, can you tell me more about that?
Dolly was worried about grabbing her necessities and personal items, and one of the few things that she did manage to grab a hold of in time was the full-length portrait of George Washington, which was previously bolted on the walls. Dolly also saved a few items such as pieces of silverware.
Sienna, what happened after the burning of the White House?
After the burning of the White House, the British burned the buildings, houses, and local landmarks surrounding the White House.
So, Ari, what were some of the effects of the White House burning down?
Due to the fact that the White House had burned down, the Capitol was now in ruins, which was obviously a huge tragedy at the time.
Why was the burning of the White House important to U.S. history?
The burning symbolized that the young nation was mostly built on democracy and freedom. The events proved that they were able to take a hard tragedy and come on.
Thanks for listening to our information on an unknown event in history. Many Americans who stayed behind feared death and destruction. The Capitol defenders were nowhere to be seen, and government officials were leaving for the federal city. The entire British Army was only a few miles away, and many Americans were in distress.